by Amsad Bitici and Delaine Lebas. On the occasion of the World Refugee Day, 11 artists presented an artwork. Okay, no, it's still 1 minute.
Nerve-wracking.
Okay, so good evening. I'm Luna from Roma Biennale, and for this evening, I am the moderator of the second artist talk for the third phase of the second Roma Biennale. We are here, curated by Hamza Bitici and Delaine Lebas. On the occasion of the World Refugee Day, 11 artists presented an artwork reflecting on and starting with World Migrants and Refugees Day under the motto Survive. I will start by explaining what is the World Migrants and Refugees Day. It is an international day proclaimed by the United Nations. It celebrates the strength and courage of people who have been forced to flee their home countries to escape conflict or persecution. Romani lives have also been linked to flight and displacement for centuries. Yet, in the current mainstream political discourse, Roma are denied the status of refugees, labeled as economic refugees, and accused of deliberately abusing the welfare system. But those who come to Germany just to survive the winter and deliberately expose themselves to traumatizing deportation are not calculating chits, but people in need who have no chance of a defined life in their country of origin because of racist discrimination. Being a refugee is not only about survival in the country of origin and during the flight. After arriving, refugees are exposed to exclusion and threats from the right. At the latest, after the right-wing's terrorist attack in February 2012 and recent death of Stanislav Thomas, the question of survival is becoming increasingly urgent. This evening, we will discuss these topics with the artists Nia Nino, Jeffrey Winnie, Siad Kazatsiu, Daniel Turner, Charles Newland, and Natalie Anguezzomo, and we will discuss about the artworks presented for this phase. I apologize in advance for my horrible accent, but I try to be as clear as possible in introducing you all. So, welcome all of you. I will begin by introducing the artist Charles Newland. Charles is a Romani Gypsy film director based in Nottingham, UK. He's the founder of film collective Noto Films and an original member of the Ears. His work has been featured by BBC, BIS, BFI, and The Guardian, and his films have been screened at a variety of international film festivals. Charles began his career in an avant-garde and experiment film. Recently, he has been making documentaries on a freelance basis. For this phase, which started on 20th June, we had the pleasure of seeing your video, a road which explored the hypocrisy and repetition of resistance GRT rhetoric in Britain, combining dog-whistletory sound bites with footage of the incident in a montage style. For those who are listening to our panel, I would like to explain that Gypsy, Roma, and traveler communities are nomadic minority ethnic groups that have been part of British society since at least the 16th century, with an estimate of approximately 300 currently residing in the UK today. The use of the term GRT, it means to distinguish between Gypsy traveler group from England, Scotland, and Wales, Irish traveler groups, and Romani Gypsy. Could you explain, Charles, what the video is about and the choice to use the loop?
Yes, well, hello, everybody. The idea for me is that the kind of things that's in the video, if you've seen it, is the police setting a dog on somebody who was staying in a trailer caravan, and a really brutal attack and completely unnecessary. And it's this kind of stuff that we've been having to put up with forever, you know, just police brutality and things like that. And on top of that, with the loop, there is also the repetition of the politician Priti Patel talking about how GRT people in Great Britain are criminals. So the repetition basically just relates back to the things that I, at 34 years old, have experienced my whole life in regards to political powers and also the police.
Mm-hmm. And what is the situation in the UK regarding the new police crime and court sentencing bill?
Well, this politician, Priti Patel, has tried to make the nomadic way of life illegal. In regards to criminality in the past, it was what is referred to as a civil offence, which wasn't on the level of what it is now, which is a criminal offence. It's like a federal crime in American terms. So what they want to do is have the power to actually take people's trailers, homes, if they deem them being in the wrong place, which is, you know, it's just absolutely, it's just a savage way to deal with a group of people, you know, so.
Yeah, to size the vehicles of the GRT community will mean that they are effectively rendered homeless, forcing them into more precarity.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that even the police don't agree with. The police are not happy about this law because they've actually got to take the homes off of people. So they know it's going to be a massive headache. Obviously, the people they're doing it to don't want it to happen. So it's being pushed through to, I think, appease a certain middle class group of people in Great Britain when most of the people don't necessarily agree with it. And it has a lot of ramifications for a large group of people.
Yeah. Discrimination in all its possible form and expression is one of the most common forms of human rights violation and abuse. It affects millions of people every day and is one of the most difficult to recognize it. It occurs when people are treated less favorable than other people in a comparable situation simply because they belong or are perceived to belong to a certain group or category of people. People may be discriminated against because of their age, disability, ethnicity, origin, political belief, race, religion, sex, or gender, and for many other reasons. Discrimination, which is often the result of prejudices that people have, renders people powerless, prevents them from becoming active citizens, limits the development of their capacities, and in many situations, their access to employment, health service, education, or housing. I would like to introduce now another artist, Jeffrey Winnie from Vancouver, Canada. His works are inspired by the landscape. He grew up in the city of Victoria on a place called Vancouver Island. The area where he lives is divided by the USA-Canada border and is a region of vast ecological wonders as well as complex, challenging histories. He identifies as a person of unclear origin. The maternal side of his family identifies as Jewish. As a Jewish artist, many of his works incorporate themes of spirituality and questions related to faith and religious identity, intertwined with mystical icons from the natural worlds that he feels deeply connected to. After studying visual art in university, he worked as a physical laborer and completed study in railway operation at the British Columbia Institute of Technology with the goal of becoming a railway construction worker. Today, he lives in Vancouver, where he's currently working on a long-term drawing project featuring heavy industries and the natural world. So welcome. The work presented for this Biennale is entitled 1858, and are a photographic series inspired by the landscapes, biodiversity, and industrial heritage of Western North America. Could you tell us how this project came about, as your actually performances that you then document through photography?
Thank you. Yes. So about photography, it was not the first form of art I tried. I have a background as doing illustration, but I found that photography was a way of experiencing landscapes in surprising ways beyond my control, and being able to walk out into the wilderness and to these places and sort of make work that is a conversation with everything around me, and does that help as a beginning point?
I will say that memory is a recreation. It is not are looking backwards, but are reaching out to a horizon somewhere out there. In traditional post-colonial society, the radically new is always embedded in a transformed by the past. It has this through what Edward Glissant calls a prophetic vision of the past, an access to cultural memory that defines the future outside of any prescription provided by national history. Indeed, post-colonial utopias are characteristically those that remember the future, but memory also operates in post-colonial utopianism in very subtle ways, almost always driven by something we could call the energy of the sacred. How would you describe the relationship between nature and spirituality, which are very present in your work?
Okay, I have a lot to say about that. So, yeah, so I came to this work absolutely through questions about my family, origins, and a lot of the perceptions about just identity in where I live, where, you know, in North America, and about connection to place and how that affects politics and notions of belonging. And I've always living here in this part of the world. I've always been often in a very difficult relationship with the way that people identify to the land in many ways. Sometimes it's positive, you know, but often, you know, so much of how Canada as a country is constructed is really about domination and about taking land from other groups, other cultures, indigenous groups here. And when I start, and those are all issues here. I mean, there's Roma rights issues here in Canada, absolutely, but also every day where I live, there's very, very difficult issues with the rights of First Nations, Indigenous people who live here as well. And so as an artist, I was thinking a lot about how do I try to create something that is more optimistic and more positive than the problems I see every day. And with spirituality, it's a way to think beyond the everyday. It's a way to think beyond the problems that we have to deal with and work to change. It's not a way of escaping, but it's a way of dreaming to something more positive, to a deeper connection. And I've always been inspired by the landscapes where I live, as said in my statement, in what you said earlier, and so I think it's a way of going beyond the borders. When you go off into the forest, you go off, you see the rivers. Those do not obey the borders. The natural landscape is an entity that is not something that can be defined by conventional notions of nation states. And I think, and in the work that you see that's being displayed, you know, there's this is along the Fraser River, which goes through Vancouver, but it goes also up into some very remote areas of the place near where I live. And it's a lot of historical events happened along this place. And I wanted to make work that went there, but without a story that we hear all the time. So I wrote poetry. I had it translated into a dialect of Romani by Sevdija Demirova Abdulova, who's a Romani leader in North Macedonia, in Skopje. And yeah, and it was a way of trying to complicate how some of the stereotypes that people have about these places. There's a certain image people have of the wilderness as this very mythologized place. And I wanted to bring into the story a suggestion that there needs to be a place for identities that are more fluid, that are more I don't know if transient is the right word, but that are not simply based on control over land. And for me, that is where spirituality comes in. And yeah, and it's really a statement on how sometimes there is freedom in living in the peripheries, and freedom even for groups of people who are on the outside looking in sometimes, who aren't always included. Life may be difficult, it may be challenging, and this, but also for any group of people who have to struggle with these questions, it also provides rich spiritual and rich artistic grounds for seeing the world, and it's actually there's a lot of positive in that position, I feel, and so that's what I wanted to show here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, it's super interesting, and I have to say that yeah, there is a really romantic melancholy in your work. I really like. I would love to introduce now Niha Pujja. He studied journalism and political science and works as photographer in Germany, USA, UK, Italy, and Balkans. Since 1992, he lives in Berlin. Pujja works with the New Society for Fine Arts, the Museum of European Cultures at the Allianz Culture Foundation. He was part of the first and second Roma Pavilion at Venice Biennale 2007 and 2011. For the second Roma Biennale, the curators have chosen you to present two photos as posters. One is Encounters. The photo of Ali is from the photo series Encounters, taken during the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic in Berlin. And the portrait image chosen is symbolic of many of the struggles faced in Berlin by people with so-called migration backgrounds. The t-shirt, the gold chain, the hat, the red mask. And the other one is Gladiators. And the photo of Valentino is a metaphor and comes from the photo series Gladiators in Rome. Would you like, Nino, to tell us about these two artistic works, and how did your interest in the photographic portrait series of Roma come about?
So hello everybody, from Berlin, from Roma Trial, and can you show please the gladiator image, then I can, if you don't see only us all the time.
You could not see the work of Jeffrey before?
Before you show
okay.
it from Jeffrey. I'm sorry, I'm not so used to Zoom.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, this is Ali.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can say first of him, about him a little bit, because it's a lot of cliche details on this. It's very classical portrait, and this red mask I used for on several occasions during the first lockdown in Berlin. And it is very simple actually, and also this football club, I don't know, Dan, if you know this, it is kind of yes, yes, it's a kind of a left-wing football club also. It means all details on the image, they have some kind of story anyway. But this is I found another image more interesting. This one is a very placative, it is a very strong image, and this is it's nice to see, and it has a message of about this cutting the mouth of the people, from especially people with migrant backgrounds, because they should be quiet, they should be still, they shouldn't move around, and they could just do what the other ones want. But can you show now another image? I would like to say something. because this story is for me is more important. I started to do the portraits of the Roma people in the beginning of 90s because I noticed that they are underrepresented in all kind of medias on the right way.
Mhm.
And this serial of gladiators, it is, as you said, is like as one metaphor about surviving from during the fight. It means, as you know, the gladiators, they fight each other first, and then only one gladiator could be, as a survivor, free. It means, I'm sorry, I'm a bit excited and my English is strange, but I hope you understand me.
No worry, we have the same problem.
Okay. Yes, as I said, these boys, I took 3 youngsters from Bosnia, and they are second generation in Italy. It means they have a permesso di soggiorno, they have all these staying possibilities, they have Italian passport and everything, but they still live in the camps. It means their life is they were born in a camp and they still live in a camp, and this story it's very difficult to leave the camp because, for example, in Italy, the Roma people, they are still not a minority. They are treated as nomads.
Yeah.
And this is there are still some countries in Europe where it is still like this. Like Denmark, for example, we don't know it, but Denmark is the same. Anyway, and this story was, I pick up these 3 guys, and I had the idea because I was in the Colosseum in Rome, 2010, and I wanted to take some pictures of the Roma people dressed in this cheap plastic, like a carnival costumes from gladiators, and also they were in the same time they were white guys, Italian guys. They were legionaries, legionari and gladiators. And I took some pictures and I went away. After a couple of years, I came back to Rome, and I went again to Colosseum. Then there were no gypsies. There were no Roma, only gladiators, only legionnaires, legionari. And then I asked legionaries, why they are gladiators, because the gladiators, they were also taking pictures together with the tourists, because tourists stand next to them, and then they were taking pictures. They were very nice bodies and everything. But in that moment, the legionary told me this very racistic statement, like, they are gypsies, they are slaves, nobody wants to take pictures of them, or nobody wants to be on the image together with them. And then I got the idea to bring them to the school and to make them, as real gladiators. And this serial of images was made in a real gladiator school in Rome. I found the school, and all this equipment is original equipment for to learn gladiators fight, and that's how it came out. Yeah.
Wow, super interesting.
Okay.
Through the medium of
Thank you.
photography, you recreate these identities, people's story, and roles within a process of social transition. And the role of the artist is often crucial, especially when the questions you pose are existence, social, political, and refugee status. How important is that Roma produce the art, but at the same time work with prejudice and stereotypes in order to disapprove them?
I would say, a lot of people, they also the Roma or not Roma, they think that they know a lot about Roma people. But if you ask them how many of them they really know, or how many of them they were visiting, how many of them they were doing something together, it's none, or maybe a couple of them. It means it's very, very limited knowledge. And this knowledge is possible. It's only important that we show that we present ourselves in that way. Like I came to in the beginning of this research for 25 years, like you came to settlement or okay, you because you know how it is, you think you know everything, what is going on and how it is going to be, or you ask for capo and capo brings you to someone and you take a pictures and capo say yes or no and these kind of things. But after sometimes you notice that it's not enough. You have to live this life, or you have to be part of it, and then you can present it on the real way. You can't do it just for the 1 day or 10 days, or you have to do it much longer. You have to live this. And I think that taking pictures of or photography of Roma people is not safari. It is human,
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I would like to introduce another of the artists was part of this survival phase. Siad Kazaksiu was born in 1987 in Fier and has been based in Tirana since 2012. Kazaksiu is a visual artist from southwest Albania and was trained as a painter at the University of Arts in Tirana from 2006-2010, where he obtained his bachelor's degree. Following his studies, he had continued to work primarily in the medium of painting, whereas his more recent practice has expanded into sculpture, installation, video, and public space intervention. With 9 personal shows since 2012 in Tirana, Budapest, and Brussels, and numerous group exhibitions, Kazaksiu remains one of the most engaged younger protagonists in the contemporary Albanian culture scene. Currently, he is a packet board member of the European Roma Institute for Art and Culture and a deputy chairman of the State Committee for National Minorities in Albania. So welcome. And the artwork exhibited for the second Roma Biennale is the small pottery houses are accessories for the artistic public performances, spontaneous action, and demonstrative protest, which he usually performs in public space to call attention to the Roma housing situation in Europe. Can you tell us where the idea for this work came from? Why the issues of prejudice, exclusion, discrimination, and racism are so important in your artistic and activist work according to your experience?
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank Hamza and Elaine for inviting me to be part of this Biennale. And also the previous artists who spoke about their works. I'm very happy to hear about their work and what they do. Actually, my work it relates to the situation of it took a central part in my work. The idea of resistance reacting to different kind of situations that happening to the community that I belong in Albania, such as the Roma community. The small house, we call it shtëpiza. It's a kind of irony that we say for this little tiny house, because this has become like a Roma headache, the issue of housing. Because it was the time that the situation of forced eviction in Albania, and not only was ongoing, also in other countries we heard about forced eviction of Roma. It's not something new, but we had many situations like in the train station that was the forced eviction of Roma without any reason. It was the other forced eviction about infrastructural issues and so on, and many protests, many reaction, but by the Roma activists were happening and so on. So this small house actually didn't came directly for this situation, but was part of a group of souvenirs that I was creating to promote Romani culture, but also to sell those souvenirs and to support a young Roma to study. So, so this was in this situation. The house came to me somehow it's like it was like I am ready here, because it was I created it as a part of souvenir, but not for the situation of the housing. So then we saw that these protests, these reactions were not having such an impact. So as I make it like a tradition in my work that I use it, I make also public intervention. I decided to take it out from the collection of souvenirs, this tiny house, and to produce it in 2,500 pieces. So, and this also make part also the community. So they also became part of my work, because I invited them, those who had problems with the first eviction, to be part of this reaction. So we organize a kind of protest with the small houses, where we throw them in front of the Prime Minister building, as a form of resistance, and also to take the situation of the housing more seriously, because the community itself, but also we were fighting for the situation of housing, we were totally okay with the infrastructural regulation and so on. But first they had to find solution for those families. So I mean, this house has become how to say, as an accessory, but also the form that it has. It's like in the resistance of the Holocaust, where they were collecting to make the resistance against the Nazi, where they sent the children to collect those stones and improvising those little weapons with agricultural tools and so on. So even this house was the kind of the same size, that the gesture of throwing something. So we were not taking now the role of the victims, but to showing also the role of active citizens, that we react for what is happening. So the community there, when we introduced when we blocked the entrance of we throw them in the entrance of the Prime Minister building, started also to organize the houses in the way that they were thinking that the area could be, how they were the area or mahala that would live to be. So it was very interesting how they were involved in this project. The situation, the house was actually, it's one of the work that has been exhibited more than the other works that I have. It has been exhibited also in the Netherlands for the situation of the refugees, for example, where I organized the performance. I turned the small house into candles, and I made a homage for the first eviction also. So I mean, it went beyond also the Roma issue. So it went more. It spoke more than a local issue that could be like an area that is forced evicted, or how to say. So it went beyond. It touched also the situation of the refugee and immigrants, because those families, some of those that were first evicted, their house was destroyed, but they were immigrants somewhere else. When they came back, they didn't find their house at home, because it was destroyed by the system. So yeah.
It's a very horrible situation. I mean, what you think about the situation in Europe in generally, when it's about minorities, but when it's about Roma people as well?
Well, I mean, I would be genius to give how to say, concrete, I mean, solution, or how to say. But I think we, as Roma, we are the biggest minority in Europe, and we are the most powerful minority at the same time. Although we are in different countries, we do not have to stay in the to victimize ourselves, but we need to take action, to use our power to react, that others do not let us down, because we are humans, and we deserve to be treated as anyone else. So I think we need to organize ourselves and to establish a platform that when it comes to one reaction, we can react in core. Although we are in the different countries, for example, also for the situation of Stanislav Tomáš in Czech Republic. So there were some signals that some NGOs, some activists, they were acting in different countries, but that's not enough. This reaction has to continue. I mean, before Stanislav Tomáš, there were many other cases that were happening. For example, even in Macedonia, Mitko from Bulgaria, that was also a case. So I think, yeah, I mean, also we need to we can use also art. So maybe we might not use the same language, but we have art as the highest highest level of bringing things up and discussion to discuss them, and not in in an aggressive way, but we can use art to make people to challenge them their perception about us. Yeah. Maybe you need to stop me, because if when I start, I don't know how to stop that.
No, it's really interesting what you are saying, and I really thank you for the beautiful words that you are spending with us. And yeah, I mean, I'm totally agree with your idea that we have to fight, we have to resist, and yeah, and to survive, because the motto of our panel this evening is survive. And your works for this second Roma Biennale, for this phase, is exactly into this topic. I would like to introduce now Dan Turner. Is an artist and educator from London, a Romani born in Kent. Dan trained at Central St. Martin's School of Arts, where he completed a bachelor honors degree in fine arts sculptures. He works across media, including sculpture, video, and painting, using transactional objects which have significance across both cultures. Turner examining how Gypsy, Roma, and traveler cultures meet and interact with the dominant culture. Is interested in how human life can be defined and archived through made object, and how this object communicate across timelines through a shared material culture and articulate that culture to a wider audience. In Turner's practice, explore the interaction between Romani and mainstream culture through themes of commercial interchange in Romani life, working with and using traditional crafts and occupations such as herbalism, peg and wooden flower making, and fortune telling. His work Seed of Elling was shown in Futurama at the Venice Biennale 2019. In 2020, he exhibited in Wales in the Gypsy Marker project, supported by the Romani Culture and Arts Company, in Berlin at the Kaidikas Gallery, and the London Broadcasting Company on the New Edition Commission. His video work, Pattern, was selected from the online 50th Roma Congress Celebration exhibition, and Dan is currently working on an online performance and installation commission for Meadow Arts and Eswari Festival 2021. Your personal reading is the artwork that you've chosen for the Survive phase, a series of playing cards. Could you explain where the idea for this work came from and the message you want to convey?
Yes, well, I guess my artwork has always been about not to deny my heritage and my culture. and a way to work within that space, within a space between the Romani community and the non-Roma community, and that the constant the constant friction, and so trying to work within that. And to do that, I choose to use things that for me have a cultural significance. So in my family, we used to use not a tarot but a playing cards to tell the fortunes. And for the Roma Biennale, I told a fortune. I told the fortune for the Roma Biennale, and these are the cards that appeared when I was talking about survival, about migrants. You know, you will soon be living under another roof, and all these things. And I was quite surprised, you know, how they actually worked and fed into the actual theme of the Biennale. Yeah, it's kind of I think there's a Palestinian designer, a fashion designer, and she said about that when you about where is it gone? In the face of erasure, you know, the preserving of a cultural heritage becomes an act of survival, and I think that's where this comes from. Showing people, you know, that, you know, this is where we are, but putting it into sort of imposing reality on you know, imposing a topicality and a reality on top of the mythic, the you know, that kind of thing, the historical, the unreliable narrative. People were talking about, somebody was talking earlier about the way that with the photography, that Roma don't have any control over their image. They don't have any control over these things, how it's presented, and that's a little bit of taking back control for me, and using those images, using those artifacts that, you know, that may be anachronisms, you know, but become part of the historical narrative, and repositioning them, using them in a different way to make people reevaluate, you know, things, and say, you know, to see that this is a culture that's still there, that is still vibrant, that can still be used to feed, you know, art and artworks and inspire. So, you know, that kind of thing. So and the work that I'm doing, the next stage, which I shouldn't really be talking about, I suppose, but again, that's around that kind of thing, about, again, talking about how you know, Roma were once famed for kind of herbalism and medicine and treating things, and you know, for animals and people, and looking at those, it's just re-examining all those things and trying to get people to see beyond, you know, just looking beyond, as we were saying about art, you know, using art to make people reevaluate and see and become, you know, involved. I think artworks have that ability to engage people in a different way, not just in the way that in activism, but it's an emotional thing. Art can, you know, that you can look at it and you become attached to, you know, and this can be passed on. So I see art as an alternative form of activism that you know, that you can use alongside the more structured you know, protest. and political interventions. So that's where I am.
Yeah. So the racist, sexist, and classist oppression is part of the nowadays structures and social system. Police violence towards Roma and other racialized people is happening all over Europe, and only very rarely do those affected and their relatives experience justice. The states and their system are not interested in investigating racist misconduct of police officers and other authorities. And unfortunately, even the European doesn't use the tools it has to push its state members to do so. So then if I ask you how you imagine the future of the Roma?
Do you mean particularly in Britain or across Europe?
Across, yeah, Europe, or if you prefer also.
Well, it's become an increasing. There's two things to it. I mean, it's you know, Roma are always sort of caught between this invisibility, you know, erasure, and hypervisibility. So there's always this tension between the two, and all the hypervisibility is always around negative, mostly about negative stereotypes, and this tension, it seems to be a constant cycle, and it unfortunately at this moment in time it seems to be one of those cycles that's rising the temperature across Europe. You know, actually, you know, even in Brazil, you know, they've had terrible massacres in you know, just for absolutely no reason. So it's getting very, very difficult. But again, I think what the Roma Biennale is saying is we are survivors. We will you know, and we can survive. You know, we've gone from you know, being, you know, even in this country, you know, it swings backwards and forwards between, you know, very, very harsh laws to a little bit less. But it's a very, very difficult time for everyone, migrants, indigenous communities. But I also think that it's this time as well is because there's much more of an raised awareness. There are people out there that are allies, that do want our story to be heard, you know, and all those kind of things. I went to an exhibition. I went to a protest some years ago around the Housing Act, and it was a very small demonstration, and it was just the community. But this Drive to Survive just recently is a much bigger, you know, much more positive, and it's an alliance of different groups, which is great. And I think we as an ethnic minority need to reach out and to try and find some allies and try and find people that were going to support us in our drive towards, you know, well, really emancipation, you know, because it's like it's been this denial of citizenhood across Europe, you know, by excluding people from education, penalizing a lifestyle, not being able to access, you know, other services, all these things. We need to start, you know, we really need to, you know, we are starting pushing. That's a positive, but it is there's no getting away from it. It's a tough time to be Roma in the world. Very tough at the moment. So sorry to be.
No, I totally understand. I mean, it's a really horrible, but we have also to look in a kind of positive, I think, way.
Well, you only
And
have to look at the Biennale and the posters
exactly.
and the richness of the work that's here, that's around. It is very positive.
Yeah,
As I said, as an
it's
alternative
exactly. It's already something to put our voice, something that probably in the past it was still not possible. And I have to say that I have, for my opinion, kind of positive vision of the future about the Roma people. And
me too.
So I will continue now with the last artist that I'm introducing this evening for our panel is Natalie Anguezuemo Bagbicoro. Her work analyzes processes of power and science fiction in historical archives, critically engaging in migrational struggles and colonial memory, focusing on queer, indigenous, and feminist biopolitics. The artist creates immersive performative environments for alternative narratives as future speculation of colonial resistance movements led by African women of the German diaspora and indigenous communities. Sedimented in narratives of testimonial Black queer experiences of sonic nature archives, revolt, queer in geologies, and post-colonial feminist experience towards new monuments which reacts to the different tones of societies shared between delusion and ritual. Natalie has developed framework of ritual and healing in performance work that often reveal the entangled colonial histories of migration at the site-specific space to dismantle prejudice and organize accessible levels of consciousness through testimonial archives of local communities to build independent emancipatory tools for liberation, education, consciousness, intimacy, and healing. She's a lecturer in curating Black visual culture and philosophy at Transheart Institute, New York, and Fine Arts Practice at the University of Liverpool, artistic and curatorial supervisor of the Artistic Training Program at the UDK and the University of Bergen, Norway. She's artistic director of Nyabingi Lab Collective, recently curating the performance program Radical Mutation at Hebel am Ufer Theater Berlin with We Are Born Free, Empowerment Radio and Free State of Barakia. She moderates the annual Berlinale Film Festival and currently has an artistic fellowship from the Goethe Institute in Bahia, Salvador, and research fellowship in the Somatic Charting project from the Institute for Endemic Research. Her work was recently featured in Arte Twist series of Our Colonial Heritage and Deutsche Welle TV in a series of short films on German colonialism and Black resistance. Her work has been featured in several international exhibitions and biennales, including the Havana Biennale in 2019, Dakar Biennale 2012-2018, Venice Biennale 2016, and La Otra Biennale in Bogota 2013, and Ravi Performance Biennale Yaoundé 2018. So it's a very pleasure to have you this evening with us. And for the opening of the third phase, the curators Deline and Amsel screened your artwork in Arcadia, How Soldiers Become Mermaids. It's a film performance you created in 2016 together with Anais Heraud, and is a poetical gesture in reimagining colonial testimonial remains of Half Moon Camp in Wunsdorf. The former camp detained prisoners of war from British and French colonial troops from 1930 until 1919. So the performance film is a ritual healing on recovering traces tying the past voices to present grounds of political conflict. Could you tell us, Natalie, about this work?
Thank you for your introduction, super. And thank you everyone for sharing your work and also your thoughts and intimate experiences. I really appreciate that. So yeah, for the final round, I guess what I can explain is that, so the work in Arcadia, how soldiers become mermaid, is kind of like, it works as a spell a bit. So this is to do with finding histories and narratives and history and testimonies of people that have been intentionally erased. So this is a story that's very specific to Berlin, notably, because I thought maybe in the way the work that was shown for this chapter for the Roma Biennale, it was important that in its location, it was really important to also amplify and elastify some of these narratives that are still very much negated, whether in the institutions still and in academia. So I start with the story of basically colonial soldiers that were detained in the First World War. That were troops mostly from the French and the British, but they were coming from different colonies, including India and Africa and different colonies elsewhere. And there were over 9,000 prisoners in this camp, which was called Wunsdorf in Moscheestraße. It was a place in 1914, it was built, where they also built the first basically mosque in Germany, based on a kind of invented, Arabic architecture. So it was pulled down later on in early 1930s. And so the reason why my work is about healing, it's about finding some of these testimonies and traces that have been erased. How do you create an intimacy or retell the story when there is no visual remnants left? So actually what I did is that I looked at first of all, I looked at a phonographic collection from the Willem Durgan collection in Berlin that recorded over 8,000 voices, mostly from these colonial soldiers, but also from, women soldiers, Black women soldiers, who also worked in the film industry and theaters industry and the music industry. And so when you look at the documents, actually all of these documents in German, mostly 65% are false, because they said that there are men, but actually it's women talking in these phonographic recordings. And also the fact that those voices are then used in colonial films from the Weimar Republic, so the First World War period until the Second World War, so until 1943, 1944. They are used in sounds and in orchestras in these colonial films in Germany. And so I specifically looked at the role of women who were part of the UFA film industry. And most of them were like, African women of the diaspora that were working with different, minority communities as we speak, including Roma women, and how a lot of blackfacing was used, for example, in advertisements, for example, for certain foods or for clothing or for soaps, etc., and how these women would talk to each other and operate, and how the systems of operations of resistance in order to be visible will then be carried on into the concentration camps. And so a lot of that was done through pirate radio, and that also echoes a lot of the methods also echo a lot of the resistance that was going on also in West Africa, in Congo, in Gabon, in Togo. And so the idea is at this time, if we don't have the voices, or even that, their whole identity was erased. So these women decided to create new identity. So they became men. So they had 5 names in order to remain in history. And what I did is that instead of redisplaying the voices of the soldiers that were murdered in these camps, or actually murdered on film sets, because they were used on film sets in Germany and killed on the film set. So often in cinema, that's what you would see, the murders of hundreds of colonial soldiers as cinema, as magic. So I looked at those spaces that are now Trummenbergs or parks around Berlin, where those soldiers were murdered for cinematic purposes and scientific purposes too, or human zoo. and use the vibrations and the sounds of the nature around. So using like the specific plants that are growing around the city, obviously not native to Berlin or to the country, they are coming from the colonies, and the seeds have been planted intentionally for those purposes, for exhibition, for filmmaking, for creating, botanical paradises and so on. And so each plant has different sounds, not according to their species, but according to the events that happen there. So when you extend the vibrations, they become a testimony, a voice. And that was basically kind of the performance. It would have been a performance because with the pandemic, we had some restrictions. But the idea was to extend some of the botanical spaces that remembered the murders of these people there, and what kind of testimonies or voices they would say. And that would become then an orchestra. And that has a direct relationship to censoring and interaction with the body in the real space. So the movie touches upon that without having to redisplay some of these, photographic colonial photos, which are extremely, extremely violent. I didn't want to redisplay this violence, but I really wanted to retransform the space. So that's what I mean by these queering ecologies. When you think about the remnants that were left there still, and into the water, when you think about 1914 and exactly 100 years later, the site of Wunsdorf was basically rebuilt as a refugee camp for Syrian refugees, for African refugees, etc. Like a prison camp, which still exists now, with the same barracks, with the same numbers on the barracks, right? So exactly the same architecture that was destroyed in the 1930s was rebuilt 100 years later. And
I think that we cannot hear. Okay. It's again the connection. It was just for 1 second.
Okay, so the idea is just to create some mourning space and ritual burial for notably the women soldiers, because it was seen as a disgrace in the war that women were at the forefront of the war wearing the men's uniform. It was, we couldn't remember that kind of history. And so actually then it's this kind of orchestra of botanical plantations becomes then a living memory, a living archive, and gives us a little bit more a knowledge about our own archive also, and how we perform these voices.
So yeah, I have to say that the colonial past and its complex repercussions have been present in post-colonial European public discourse for quite some time now, but still neither former colonial powers like the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, nor the successor of the private companies involved in colonization have yet fully acknowledged, apologized, or paid reparation for the crimes committed during European colonialism. Beyond that, questions remain about how colonial structures persist in present-day national and international law. We all have an image of justice in our minds. One can fall into a trap by summarizing this human pain and suffering and historicizing it as though it was not here with us today. Still, as people who are suspicious of international law, we must still ask, how can we use the law? Our challenge here is not to think in established categories, but to try to rebuild international law and to start thinking in solidarity. What makes a local norm universal? Should accountability for colonial injustice be limited? How do we deal with action that were and are still wrong and repugnant? There are not simple questions, and however, there is a shifting standard of accountability for past and present abuses and injustice, and this is where we need to pay attention. So your work, Natalie, offers complex, not binary readings, pushing new investigation about the architectures of racism in cities, the archaeology of urban space, and economies of traditional system by exposing the limitation of technologies as function memory records. Could you please explain these topics in more details?
So basically what I try to do is a bit transform this idea of what is legitimized in the archives and what is legitimized as historical content. And what I mean, from my experience working in archives for over 15 years now, mostly in Britain, in Germany, and in South Africa, is that a lot of these archives are very based on the intention of the political narrative of a very small group of people, very powerful small group of people, which are basically male, white, and in an institution. So they don't, they erase a lot of the real experiences of people. And I think this is notably true recently. It was announced publicly that Germany would finally, send 1.3 billion as reparations to the Nama and Herero peoples in Namibia. But this is, again, so much of the story is lost because actually, I mean, this is not reparation and this is not repatriation or restitution. This is aid money. So it's a system that will go, it will go right back to German banks, basically. And the problem is this decision was made without the consultations of the chefs and the Herero and Namas community. That those finances don't go directly to them, it goes to another tribe. So therefore it creates local conflict. And what they don't talk about is that within basically when this was announced publicly, within 1 month, just 1 month prior, about 30 Herero and Nama chefs died within 30 days of each other. And this is something like, so there's a whole different historical movement that is happening in Namibia than what is presented in Europe, right, in this context. So I think, for me would be to have to change the movement of the narrative, because this was celebrating as a big step. Also in the American context, this was very much celebrated, but this is not really a way to repair. And I think what I'm in this work specifically, what I was trying to do is that thinking about those technologies of science that supposed to be so accurate to the reality of people actually create again these false narratives, and then you're left with archaeology of white supremacy and of white institution. And I feel that, how far are we committed to this whiteness if you really want to do this healing, this ritual, and this change, and to remain positive. So I wanted to, from a work that I did some years ago, because Gabon, the north of Gabon was also colonized by Germans, but they left in the 1920s after the First World War. But the gray parrots in the forest are still speaking German today. So when I go down there, all these parrots are speaking in German from the 1910s, and they re-performed the Sound of the War from 1914. And so what I understood is that, hey, now not only, all these archives in the German institution, we have the entrap the voices of our people, but yet we don't have the voices of the perpetrators. So then when you hear the voice of the perpetrators being recorded by the nature, that this ecosystem, then it gives me another question. So what about legitimizing the technology of these ecosystems that are growing under the water, these, this kind of museums of unspoken or deleted narratives? And I think, that's why I think that we have to think of technologies in a different way, that is queering, that is creative, that can push different questions and navigate different dialogues and see how fragile this institutional and academic system really is, because then they fortify, but also expose a whole system of plagiarism and of creating these narratives that are very much committed to whiteness according to the funding that institutions get also. And so I think for me to challenge some of these parameters and having to expose the voice of those perpetrators through the voices of parrots, it kind of gave me another way to think about the archaeologies of the city in terms of racism and where did these minorities go? Where did did our stories go with our ancestors, and how it's still perpetrated today, because it's not just in the past, it's colonial continuities that are still happening today. So I wanted to make sure that these experiences were visible, but not reproduced through colonial display and violence, because I think I feel that we really have to challenge these.
Mhm.
So the fact that, in order to have evidence or true facts, you do not have to rely on the, on the narratives of a white male, for example.
Mhm.
What about what is its story otherwise? And so that's why the power of the technologies of these ecosystems can begin to kind of, destabilize and dismantle some of these white mythologies. Mm.
Wow, super interesting. We have still few, minutes. It's an artist talk, it's a panel, is open. If someone wants to ask or say something, it's completely, open the panel. I would like to say that, this means that for us, we have to organize ourselves both across communities and across countries, and we have to demand a radical systematic change. And of course, art can offer a rich intellectual starting point. It can disrupt existing images and create new utopias. Art is free of boundaries. Art is a real change to decolonize our minds. This is crucially important for the future of our children. They have to liberate themselves from the white gates, from the oppressive system. And in this case, I would like to thank all the artists for being part of this panel and for introducing us to their artistic work. I concluded by saying that I hope that these events and the second Roma Biennale can be a hope and at the same time give rise to a sense of resistance for all Roma, Muslim people of color, especially women who want to fight for positive change and above all be able to redeem themselves in society without being afraid to show their identity. And the works of our artists are exhibited throughout the city of Berlin and by our official partners as poster until October, and can also be seen in the online gallery and be also downloaded from the website Roma Biennale. I will just ask to all the artists for close the panels. How one word about the motto survival, how the work that are displayed for this phase can be correlated with the motto survival. And I will start again with Charles, if he's still online.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, I think for me, we've just got to keep creating the artworks that we're creating and doing our part, just spread awareness of what's happening. I can't speak too much for what's happening in mainland Europe, but especially in the UK with the laws that's being put through and stuff, we've just got to keep going. That's all we can do.
Okay, I continue with Jeffrey.
So the question is, I just wanted to clarify the question again.
The question is how your work that is displayed for this phase survival, it can be, you want to say some words about this motto and how it's connected with survival.
Yes, with my work, it's connected to survival through visual language and this idea that we don't have to understand everything we see to find a new way of learning something. We can see something we don't understand, and it can ask us questions that we can ask ourselves. And sometimes when we live in a place that is haunted by difficult histories, difficult pasts, we can go into the world with questions and with a genuine curiosity, and that's how we survive. That's how cultures survive. They do it by constant change and transformation, negotiation, and that's what my work is about. It's about the way that the language of identity and the way that the way that the language of identity and the language of making do with many materials allows people to move forward and to continue regardless of the conditions that they are living through. And there is always survival.
Thank you. And Nino, for you, do you want to spend some words about the motto survival? We don't hear you. You have to.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't sleep. Yeah. To survive, it is not so easy, especially in this modern times. But I think for all groups or all Roma people, or anyway, all marginalized people, it is very important to be educated. I think the education is the most powerful word, for this, and only through knowledge and through the education we can get and we can reach more and more recognition from majorities. It means I believe in this anyway. I believe in my family, my son, or his son, or this is our future, and I think they could do it more anyway. And we did a lot, but they will get the more, I think.
Thank you. Fair, it's your moment.
Actually, yes, I have a lot to say about this. And this actually brought in my mind my work when I participated in the first edition of Autostrada Biennale, where I write in different parts of the city with golden balloons, "I don't have borders to protect." This was a sentence which was conserved in our family, in our great-grandfathers, as say that they didn't want it, they were hiding their children to not send them in the national wars, in the wars. So, and I took this sentence and I wanted this sentence to the others to borrow it. And I think we don't have borders to protect also today, but we have rights to protect. And for this, we need to show our presence by any means, more than the others do. So we need to show our presence in everywhere, in every situation that is happening around us. But because sometimes our presence distracts the others. So and we need to find ways to show, because like this we will survive. Otherwise we will go, I mean we will how to say, stay in our corner, and the situation will not change, and we stay like that. But showing the presence by any means, I think this I think will change and will provoke also other people. For example, this biennale is showing our presence at the same. So I mean the symbolic, it's very strong. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sir. And I would like to know also about Dan Turner, with if you want to spend some words about survival, the motto survival. Dan?
I'll mute myself. Beg your pardon. I'll unmute myself. It's yes, around survival. I think it's what Natalie was saying earlier about this narrative, this unreliable narrative, and things like the Roma Biennale and Roma artists. You know, we're chipping away at this this distorted idea of Roma, and the more we can do that, you know, that's where we need to change. You know, we need a presence out there. We need to be seen, as Nina was saying. We need to be seen. We need to be around. We need to be seen in a different way, not this narrative. We need not the narrative that is being peddled in this country and across Europe about slaves and subhumans and God knows what. We need to take that away and show people, you know, that, and we're doing that, and that's going to work for our survival. That's where it's going. So
thank you very much. And for the end, Natalie, if you want, to tell in your work how you connect with the motto survival.
I would just say simply just, you know, write your own story and leave as many traces as you can, because the work that we have to do is for ourselves. I think a lot of the experience that we share within our families and within long time and probably still time to come is trauma. And the way that we have survived, actually, I mean, in the case of my family, at least, is that they survive trauma through silence. And I think there comes to a point for me, I find it very dangerous because then it creates a kind of cultural amnesia in the later on in the descendants. And I feel that for me, it's really important to, you know, with this aspect of, you know, healing and ritual and whatever creative means that we have, means that we have to write our own story. So whether you want to do it with pen and paper or with music or with conversations, in our creative experiments, that's how we write our own narratives so that other people can have anchors, you know, in these histories that we can connect so that we don't become isolated and we have a better chance to survive certain political upheavals and challenges. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. So thank you to all the artists again that to be part of this beautiful panel. And we look forward to see you at the next phase about the Remembrance Day on 2nd of August. And thank you again. I wish you a wonderful evening. And yes, that's the end of our artist talk for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
everyone.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you and bye.
Bye-bye.